The Apache woman hidden in the barn until the rancher said, "Stay with me." The ranch sat far from the main road, surrounded by open land that stretched as far as the eye could see. Dusty paths cut through tall grass, and old wooden fences leaned with age. The rancher had lived there most of his life. He was a quiet man who believed in routine, hard work, and keeping to himself. Every morning he woke before sunrise, fed the animals, checked the fences, and worked until the sky turned orange in the evening. He did not ask much from life, and life rarely surprised him. That evening felt no different at first. The sun was slowly setting, and the air was calm. The rancher finished locking the main gate and walked toward the barn to check the horses one last time. As he stepped closer, something felt off. The barn door, which he always kept shut, was slightly open. It moved gently with the wind, making a soft creaking sound. He stopped walking and listened. The land was usually quiet at this hour, too quiet. He frowned and moved closer, his boots crunching against dry ground. When he reached the door, he noticed marks in the dirt. Footprints. They were not his. He knew his own steps well, and these were lighter, unfamiliar. Inside the barn, the smell of hay mixed with something else, fear, though he could not explain how he sensed it. The animals were restless, shifting their weight and making low sounds. The rancher held his breath and stepped inside. The barn was dim, with only thin lines of light slipping through cracks in the wooden walls. He scanned the space slowly. Everything looked mostly the same, but then he saw it. Behind stacked tools and old blankets there was movement. A shadow shifted. Someone was there. "Hello," he said calmly, though his heart beat faster. The movement stopped. He took another step forward, careful not to sound threatening. "I won't hurt you," he added, unsure why he felt the need to say it. Slowly, a woman emerged from behind the hay bales. She looked exhausted. Her clothes were dusty and worn, her hair tangled. Her face showed signs of long days without rest. She flinched when she saw him clearly, her body tense as if ready to run. One of her arms was held close to her side, and he noticed she was hurt. She did not speak. Her eyes, dark and alert, stayed fixed on him. They were not empty eyes. They were sharp, full of fear, but also strength. The rancher realized she was Apache, something he recognized from her features and the way she carried herself. She looked like someone who had been surviving on her own for a while. For a moment, neither of them moved. The barn felt smaller, the silence heavy. The rancher slowly raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "I just want to know why you're here." She did not answer. Instead, she took a small step back, her eyes darting toward the open door as if planning an escape. He could have turned around. He could have told her to leave. He could have gone to town and reported what he saw. All of those choices passed through his mind in seconds, but something stopped him. It was the way she stood there, injured and alone, like someone who had run out of places to go. He stepped aside, giving her space. "You don't have to talk," he said. "Not right now." She studied him carefully, as if weighing his words. Slowly, she lowered herself onto a pile of hay, her strength clearly fading. That was when he knew she had been hiding there for some time. The rancher went to a nearby shelf and grabbed a bottle of water. He placed it on the ground a few steps away from her and backed off. "Drink," he said softly. After a long pause, she reached for it. Her hands shook as she drank, her eyes never leaving his face. As the light outside faded, the barn grew darker. The rancher knew he couldn't leave things like this. "I'm going to step outside for a minute," he said. "I'll bring food." She nodded slightly, the first sign of response. Outside, the sky was turning purple. The rancher leaned against the barn wall and let out a slow breath. His quiet life had just changed, and he wasn't sure how. He thought about the risks, the questions, and the trouble this situation might bring. But he also thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. He returned with bread, soup, and a clean cloth. Inside the barn, he placed everything within her reach and stepped back again. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone who had learned not to trust kindness easily. They stayed like that for a while, two strangers sharing the same space, bound by silence. Eventually she spoke, her voice low and cautious. She did not explain everything, only enough to make one thing clear: she had nowhere else to go. The rancher listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "We'll figure out the rest later." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if a heavy weight had lifted, even if only for a moment. That night, as the rancher walked back to his house, he knew sleep would not come easily. The wind moved across the land, carrying the quiet promise that nothing would be the same again. Morning came slowly to the ranch. The sky was still pale when the rancher woke up, but his mind was already heavy with thoughts. He had not slept well. Every sound during the night had pulled him half awake, his thoughts always returning to the barn and the woman hiding inside it. He lay still for a moment, staring at the wooden ceiling, listening to the quiet. The land outside was calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. But he knew better. He got up, washed his face, and dressed quickly. As he stepped outside, the cool air touched his skin. The sun was just beginning to rise, spreading soft light over the fields. Normally, this time of day brought him peace. Today, it brought responsibility. He walked toward the barn, carrying a small bag with food, clean water, and basic supplies. His steps were slow, careful. He did not want to scare her. When he opened the barn door, he paused and listened. Everything was still. "She's still here," he thought, feeling a strange mix of relief and worry. Inside, the woman sat where he had last seen her. She looked up sharply when she noticed him, her body stiff at first. Then she relaxed just a little when she recognized his face. He noticed she had barely moved during the night, likely afraid to make noise. "Good morning," he said quietly. She nodded once but said nothing. He set the bag down near her and stepped back. "I brought food," he said, "and some things to help your arm." She glanced at her injured arm, then back at him. Slowly, she reached for the supplies. The wound was not fresh, but it had not healed properly. He could see that she had done what she could on her own. "May I?" he asked, gesturing gently. She hesitated. Trust did not come easily to someone who had been running. After a long moment, she nodded. He cleaned the wound carefully, working slowly, making sure not to cause pain. She watched his hands closely, alert to every movement. The barn was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals shifting nearby. When he finished, he stepped away. "That should help," he said. She whispered a quiet "thank you," her voice barely audible. It was the first clear word she had spoken to him, and it stayed with him longer than he expected. The days that followed settled into a careful rhythm. The woman stayed hidden in the barn, resting during the day and moving quietly at night. The rancher brought her meals, water, and clean clothes. They spoke little, but when they did, it was honest. She told him small pieces of her story, never all at once. She had left her community because staying had become dangerous. The reasons were complicated, tied to conflict and misunderstanding, and she did not want to explain everything. The rancher did not push. He understood that some wounds were deeper than words. Trust grew slowly, like grass after a long, dry season. She began helping in small ways, organizing tools, feeding animals when it was safe, sweeping the barn floor. These simple tasks gave her a sense of purpose. The rancher noticed how carefully she worked, how respectful she was of the land and the animals. It reminded him of values he had grown up with. Still, fear followed them both. Every time a vehicle passed near the ranch, she froze. Every unfamiliar sound made her tense. The rancher started paying closer attention to the road, to strangers, to things he had once ignored. He realized that protecting her meant more than just offering food and shelter. It meant staying alert. One afternoon, while they sat in the shade of the barn door, she finally spoke more openly. She told him about walking for days, hiding at night, and trusting no one. Her voice did not shake, but her eyes showed how hard it had been. "I didn't plan to come here," she said. "I just needed somewhere quiet." He nodded. "This place is quiet," he said, "sometimes too quiet." She gave a small smile, the first he had seen. But peace never comes without cost. A few days later, the rancher noticed unfamiliar tire tracks near the fence. They were fresh. His chest tightened. That evening, a truck slowed as it passed the ranch. It did not stop, but it didn't feel right. That night, the woman stood by the barn door, ready to leave. "I can't stay," she said quietly. "I don't want trouble to follow you." He looked at her, surprised by the pain in her voice. "You're not trouble," he said. She shook her head. "You don't understand." He did understand enough. Helping her meant risk. He knew that, but turning her away now felt worse. "Stay tonight," he said. "At least tonight." She agreed, though fear still clouded her face. As the stars filled the sky, the rancher sat on his porch thinking. His life had always been simple, predictable. Now it stood at a crossroads. He knew that the days ahead would demand courage, patience, and choices he had never planned to make. Inside the barn, the woman lay awake, listening to the night sounds. For the first time in a long while, she was not completely alone, but she also knew that safety was fragile. Both of them sensed it. Something was coming. The next few days felt heavier than before. The air around the ranch seemed tense, as if the land itself sensed trouble. The rancher continued his daily work, but his eyes were always moving now. He listened more closely to sounds, watched the road longer than usual, and trusted his instincts more than ever. The woman noticed the change in him. She could tell he was worried, even when he tried to hide it. She stayed quieter, moving only when necessary. The barn, once just a place to hide, had become a shared space of waiting, waiting for answers, waiting for safety, waiting to see what would happen next. One afternoon, dust rose on the road leading to the ranch. A vehicle approached slowly, then stopped near the fence. Two men stepped out. They did not look like locals. Their clothes were clean, their movements confident, and their eyes searched the land carefully. The rancher felt his stomach tighten. He walked toward them calmly, keeping his posture relaxed. "Can I help you?" he asked. One of the men smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "We're looking for someone," he said. "A woman. We heard she might have passed through this area." The rancher kept his face neutral. "Lots of people pass through," he replied. "I haven't seen anyone." The men exchanged a glance. "Mind if we take a look around?" the other asked. The rancher shook his head. "This is private land." The smile faded. The silence stretched. Finally, the men stepped back into their vehicle. "If you see anything," one said, "let us know." The rancher watched until the truck disappeared down the road. Only then did he let out the breath he had been holding. Inside the barn, the woman had heard everything. "I have to leave," she said as soon as he returned. Her voice was firm, but fear trembled beneath it. "They're getting closer." He looked at her, seeing not just fear, but care. She was thinking of him, not just herself. "If you go now, they'll find you," he said. "You're safer here than out there." She shook her head. "No one is safe forever." That night, neither of them slept. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow felt closer. The rancher sat on a chair near the barn, watching the land, ready for anything. The woman sat quietly, holding her small bag, prepared to run if she had to. As the hours passed, something shifted between them. The silence was no longer empty. It was shared. Just before dawn, she spoke again. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." He thought about the question for a long time before answering. "I know enough," he said. "I know what it looks like when someone has nowhere else to go." She looked down at the ground. "People like me don't get many chances," she said softly. "Maybe they should," he replied. The next day brought more pressure. A neighbor stopped by unexpectedly, asking questions about strangers in the area. The rancher answered carefully, choosing his words with care. After the neighbor left, he knew things were becoming more dangerous. That evening, the woman packed her bag again. "I can't keep hiding," she said. "I've been running for too long." He watched her, realizing that whatever choice she made would change both of their lives. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in deep orange and red. The land looked peaceful, almost mocking the tension they felt inside. "I won't stop you," he said finally, "but I won't push you away either." She stood still, caught between fear and hope. The road beyond the ranch waited, so did the unknown. And in that moment, both of them understood that the hardest choice was still ahead. The sun had almost disappeared when the rancher finally spoke again. The woman stood near the barn door, her small bag resting at her feet. She looked ready to leave, but her eyes kept returning to him, as if she was hoping he would say something that could change everything. The land around them was quiet. Even the animals seemed still, listening. "You don't have to go," he said at last. His voice was calm, but there was strength behind it. "Not tonight, not like this." She swallowed hard. "You don't understand what could happen to you," she replied. "I've already brought enough trouble." He took a step closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "I understand more than you think," he said. "I understand what it means to turn someone away when they're asking for help, and I won't do that." She looked down at the ground. Her hands were shaking slightly. For so long, every choice she had made was about survival. Trust had never been part of the plan. Depending on someone else felt dangerous. "I've been hidden my whole life," she said quietly. "Hidden in places like this, always waiting for the moment I'd have to run again." He listened without interrupting. He had learned that listening was sometimes the most important thing a person could do. "You don't have to hide here," he said gently. "This is my land. If anyone asks, you're my guest." She looked up sharply. "That puts you right in the middle." "I'm already there," he answered. The words hung between them, heavy and real. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, she pushed her bag aside and sat down on the wooden step near the barn. It was a small action, but it meant everything. That night, the rancher made a decision. He brought her blankets and set up a more comfortable space inside the barn. He showed her where she could rest safely, away from open view. He did not lock her in or watch her closely. He gave her something she had not felt in a long time: choice. As the night deepened, the sound of the wind moved through the fields. The rancher stayed nearby, not sleeping, just listening. The woman lay awake as well, staring up at the dark wooden beams above her. Her thoughts raced, but beneath them was something new. A fragile sense of relief. The next morning, the rancher spoke first. "If you're going to stay," he said, "we do this the right way, no hiding forever." She nodded slowly. "I don't know how," she admitted. "We'll figure it out," he replied. They began with small steps. She helped more openly now, still careful but no longer frozen by fear. She worked in the early mornings and late afternoons, staying closer to the ranch house when needed. The rancher explained routines, boundaries, and what to do if anyone came by. A few days later, the strangers returned. This time they did not stop at the fence. They drove closer, dust rising behind their vehicle. The rancher felt his chest tighten, but he did not panic. He walked forward, standing tall, his hands visible, his voice steady. "What do you want?" he asked. The same man from before stepped out. "We're still looking," he said. "You sure you haven't seen her?" The rancher did not hesitate. "She's here," he said. The words shocked even himself. The man raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes," the rancher replied. "And she's staying." There was a long pause. The woman stood a few steps behind him, her heart pounding. She had expected fear, maybe anger. What she felt instead was something close to disbelief. The man glanced at her, then back at the rancher. "You know what this could mean," he said. "I do," the rancher answered, "and I've made my choice." The tension stretched like a tight rope. Finally, the men stepped back. "This isn't over," one said. "Maybe not," the rancher replied. "But this is my land." When the vehicle finally drove away, the woman felt her knees weaken. She sat down hard on the ground, breathing fast. The rancher turned to her immediately. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though tears filled her eyes. "No one has ever done that for me," she said. "No one ever stood up like that." He crouched down so they were at eye level. "Everyone deserves someone who will," he said. That moment changed everything. The days that followed were not easy, but they were honest. The woman began to speak more freely. She shared stories of her past, her family, her culture, and the strength she had learned from her people. The rancher listened, learning a world he had only known from a distance. She, in turn, learned about the ranch, the land, and the man who had chosen to stand with her. She saw his quiet kindness, his stubborn sense of right and wrong, and his deep respect for the earth. One evening, as they sat watching the sun set over the fields, she spoke softly. "When you said, 'Stay with me,' you didn't just mean the barn, did you?" He shook his head. "I meant life," he said simply. She smiled, a real smile this time, full of warmth and emotion. "Then I'll stay," she said, "not because I'm hiding, but because I choose to." The sky turned gold, then deep blue. For the first time in a long while, both of them felt something rare: hope. The days after that decision passed slowly, but they felt different. The fear did not disappear overnight, yet it no longer controlled every moment. The woman woke each morning knowing she was not alone anymore. The rancher woke knowing his quiet life had changed, but instead of regret, he felt purpose. They began building a new routine together. She no longer stayed hidden in the barn all day. In the early mornings, when the air was cool and the land was quiet, she stepped outside and helped with small tasks. She fed the animals, cleaned tools, and learned the rhythms of the ranch. The work grounded her. It reminded her that she was capable, strong, and useful, not just someone running from danger. The rancher noticed how naturally she cared for the land. She spoke softly to the animals, moved carefully through the fields, and treated every task with respect. It reminded him that the land did not belong to one person alone. It belonged to those who honored it. There were still moments of tension. Sometimes a car passed too slowly on the road and both of them froze. Sometimes a knock on the gate made their hearts race. But each time they faced it together. The rancher answered questions calmly. The woman stood beside him, no longer hidden but still alert. Word slowly spread that the rancher had taken someone in. Some people were curious, some were cautious, a few were unkind. But the rancher did not change his stance. He treated her with respect, and in doing so made it clear how he expected others to behave as well. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by and saw her working near the barn. The neighbor hesitated, clearly unsure what to say. The rancher spoke first, introducing her simply as someone staying on the ranch. The woman met the neighbor's eyes and nodded politely. Her hands did not shake. That small moment mattered more than anyone realized. Over time, the pressure from the outside began to fade. The strangers did not return. The road stayed quiet. Life did not become perfect, but it became stable. That stability gave the woman space to breathe, to think, and to heal in ways she had not expected. In the evenings, they often sat outside as the sun went down. They talked about simple things at first: the weather, the animals, the changes in the land. Later, the conversations grew deeper. She spoke about her childhood, her family, and the strength she had learned from her people. She spoke about loss, but also about resilience. The rancher shared his own story too. He spoke about growing up on the land, about choosing a quiet life, and about the loneliness he had not fully admitted to himself before. He realized that helping her had also helped him. It had brought meaning into spaces he had left empty for too long. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, she said, "I used to think home was a place you were born into. Now I think it's a place where someone chooses you." He nodded. "I think you're right." Seasons began to change. The heat softened and the air grew cooler. The woman no longer felt like a guest. She felt like part of the ranch. She took pride in her work and found comfort in routine. She laughed more. She slept without waking at every sound. The barn that once hid her fear now stood as a symbol of survival. It reminded her how far she had come. One morning, she stood near the fence, watching the sun rise. The rancher joined her, handing her a cup of warm drink. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Letting me stay?" He shook his head without hesitation. Not for a second, she smiled, her eyes bright. Then neither do I. They knew life would still bring challenges. The world was not always kind and the past did not disappear easily. But they had learned something important together. Courage did not always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looked like opening a door. Sometimes it sounded like quiet words spoken at the right moment. Stay with me. Those words had changed everything. As the sun rose higher, the ranch stood peaceful and strong, grounded in trust, respect, and shared strength. Two lives once separate and uncertain now moved forward side by side, not hidden, not afraid, but steady and free. And that was enough.